In the autumn of 1571, in the small Lombard town of Caravaggio near Milan, a child was born who would forever change the world of art, Michelangelo Merisi. His birth coincided with one of Italy's darkest times, as plague swept through the land. His father, Fermo Merisi, worked for the local marquis, and his mother, Lucia Aradori, came from a modest but respected family. Though his early years promised stability, the plague would soon claim most of his family. By the time Michelangelo was 6, both his father and grandfather were dead. Orphaned young, Caravaggio learned early about loss and suffering, emotions that would later fill his canvases with haunting realism. He was a boy of contrasts, quiet yet impulsive, deeply observant yet defiant. The streets of Lombardy became his first classroom, where he watched life's raw truth unfold in markets, churches, and alleyways. No one knew then that this child would grow to redefine painting itself, turning beauty into brutality and shadow into divine light. At age 13, Caravaggio was sent to Milan to apprentice under Simone Peterzano, a student of Titian. For 4 years, he learned the craft, mixing pigments, preparing canvases, and studying anatomy. Peterzano introduced him to the techniques of Venetian color and the sensual play of light, but young Caravaggio's imagination already leaned towards something more daring. He grew impatient with idealized beauty, preferring to paint real people, peasants, beggars, and prostitutes. Milan's grimy streets became his inspiration, its harsh realities his muse. The city's dark alleys and candlelit taverns stirred his fascination with shadow, a force he would later master. Yet his temper often clashed with his teacher's discipline. He was ambitious, rebellious, and eager to break free. In 1592, after his mother's death, he left Milan behind and headed to Rome, the heart of art and power. He carried nothing but his brushes, courage, and a burning hunger to be seen, unaware that in Rome, both fame and danger awaited him. Rome was magnificent, but merciless. Caravaggio arrived penniless, wandering from one workshop to another, offering his talent in exchange for food or a bed. He worked briefly for Giuseppe Cesari, a successful painter known for his decorative style. There, Caravaggio painted fruits, flowers, and still lives, mundane tasks that frustrated his passionate spirit. He lived in poverty, often sick and hungry, sleeping in taverns and hospitals. Yet amid this hardship, he began to experiment with realism unlike anything Rome had seen. He painted street boys, ragged workers, and courtesans with divine intensity. Each face was real, imperfect, alive. His art spoke truth, brutal and beautiful. Around 1595, his small painting The Cardsharps caught the eye of Cardinal del Monte, a refined patron who recognized genius behind the chaos. For the first time, Caravaggio had protection, comfort, and an audience. But fame, once it found him, would awaken the darker sides of his nature. Under Cardinal del Monte's patronage, Caravaggio flourished. He painted in the cardinal's elegant palace, surrounded by musicians, philosophers, and thinkers. His revolutionary style, blending light and darkness, realism and emotion, fascinated all who saw it. Works like The Lute Player and The Fortune Teller showcased his gift for revealing humanity's soul. Then came his great breakthrough, The Calling of St. Matthew, painted for the Contarelli Chapel. In this masterpiece, divine light sliced through darkness to reveal a moment of spiritual awakening. Viewers were stunned. Here was not idealized holiness, but ordinary men, dirty, unshaven, caught in divine mystery. Rome hailed him as a genius. Commissions poured in. But with fame came envy. Critics mocked his use of prostitutes as models, and rivals despised his arrogance. Caravaggio, quick-tempered and proud, responded not with words, but with violence. His art reached divine heights even as his life sank into chaos. Caravaggio's personality was as dramatic as his art. He carried a sword, quarreled often, and had frequent run-ins with the law. He brawled in taverns, insulted fellow artists, and even attacked officers. His reputation as a dangerous genius grew as fast as his fame. Yet every time he seemed doomed, his talent saved him. The church continued to commission him despite scandals, because no one could paint like Caravaggio. His works like Judith beheading Holofernes and the conversion of St. Paul shocked audiences with their raw realism. He painted saints and sinners as one, human, flawed, and divine. But his temper spiraled out of control. In 1603, he was jailed for defamation. In 1605, for carrying weapons illegally. Still, each crisis seemed to fuel his creativity. Caravaggio lived like a candle burning at both ends. His brilliance illuminated the world, even as his own life began to darken beyond repair. In 1606, Caravaggio's life took a deadly turn. After years of tension and violent encounters, he got into a heated argument with a man named Ranuccio Tomassoni, reportedly over a gambling debt or perhaps a woman. The quarrel escalated into a duel in Rome's Campo Marzio. Swords clashed, blood spilled, and Caravaggio's blade struck fatal. Tomassoni was dead. Rome's courts declared Caravaggio a murderer. Facing execution, he fled the city under cover of night. From that moment, he became both fugitive and legend, an outlaw artist carrying his genius across the Italian South. His friends and patrons tried to protect him, but Rome had closed its doors. The man who once painted divine light now lived forever in the shadow of his own crime. Caravaggio sought refuge in Naples, then ruled by Spain. Despite his fugitive status, his fame preceded him. The city's elite welcomed the notorious artist, and soon he was commissioned to paint altarpieces like the Seven Works of Mercy, a masterpiece of compassion and chaos. In Naples, his style deepened. His colors grew darker, his emotions more tormented. The trauma of exile haunted his brush. He painted faces of despair and salvation, as if pleading for his own redemption. Yet even in this new city, trouble followed. He fought with local rivals and was wounded in brawls. Still, his art drew admiration and awe. For a moment, it seemed he might rebuild his life, until he decided to move on once more, searching for forgiveness and peace he would never find. In 1607, Caravaggio sailed to Malta, home of the powerful Knights of St. John. He hoped their favor could earn him a royal pardon for his crime. The Grand Master, Alof de Wignacourt, admired his talent and welcomed him. Caravaggio painted grand works, such as the beheading of St. John the Baptist, a monumental painting signed humbly with his name, the only one he ever signed. The knights made him a member of their order, an honor beyond belief for a criminal. For a brief time, it seemed salvation was near. But his restless nature betrayed him again. Within a year, he was accused of assaulting a fellow knight and thrown into prison. In a daring escape, he broke free and fled Malta by boat, his name branded as a foul and rotten member of the order. His redemption had slipped away once again. From Malta, Caravaggio fled to Sicily, finding temporary safety in Syracuse, Messina, and Palermo. His art grew heavier, his colors more shadowed, his figures more ghost-like. In the burial of St. Lucy and the raising of Lazarus, the light seemed weaker, as though fading along with his spirit. He moved constantly, fearing capture, painting restlessly. Those who met him described a haunted man, paranoid, scarred, and weary. Yet even in despair, his genius persisted. Everywhere he went, cities competed for his work, knowing each painting might be his last. In Sicily's dim churches, Caravaggio poured his pain onto canvas, his brush trembling with guilt and grace. He longed for Rome, for forgiveness, for peace, but destiny had other plans. The year was 1609. Caravaggio returned to Naples, haunted, scarred, and desperate. His once handsome face was now marked by the violent encounters of exile. Yet even as his body weakened, his artistic fire burned brighter than ever. Naples received him with fascination, a living legend, both feared and admired. But danger still followed him. One night outside a tavern, a group of armed men attacked him. He was left bleeding in the street, disfigured and half dead. Rumors said his attackers were knights from Malta, taking revenge for his escape. Caravaggio recovered slowly, but the man who rose from that bed was no longer the same. His eyes carried the weight of guilt, exile, and fear. Yet his paintings during this time were breathtaking, darker, deeper, and more spiritual than ever. He painted David with the head of Goliath, giving Goliath his own face, a silent confession of his sins, a plea for mercy. He wrote letters begging the Pope for pardon, yearning to return to Rome. The sword that once defended him now felt heavy with regret. Naples had become both his refuge and his prison. The streets whispered of redemption, but death was already following close behind. By 1610, whispers reached Caravaggio. Pope Paul V was preparing to pardon him. Hope flickered like a candle in a storm. He gathered his few belongings, including his final paintings, and boarded a small ship bound for Rome. The sea was calm, but his soul was not. Along the way, something went terribly wrong. He was reportedly arrested by mistake, suspected of being a wanted man, and briefly jailed. When released, his ship, along with his precious artworks, had sailed without him. Desperate to catch it, Caravaggio walked for miles under the blazing Italian sun, along the swampy coast of Tuscany. He grew feverish, weak, delirious. Some say he was struck by malaria. Others claim his old wounds reopened. Alone and burning with fever, he collapsed near Porto Ercole. A few days later, the great Caravaggio, the painter of divine light and mortal sin, was dead at only 38. No one knows where his body truly lies. His name faded into rumor, his paintings scattered. But in that lonely death, under the relentless sun and crashing waves, Caravaggio's story reached its tragic perfection, a man consumed by his own brilliance, chasing redemption that came too late. Caravaggio's death did not end his story. It began his legend. Within a few years, his paintings became the talk of Europe. Artists couldn't ignore what he had done. He had changed everything forever. His use of chiaroscuro, the contrast of blinding light and deep shadow, was not just a technique. It was a language. He turned ordinary people into divine subjects and made holiness believable again. His saints had dirt on their feet. His angels came from the streets. Where Renaissance painters sought perfection, Caravaggio sought truth. His brush captured life as it was, broken, human, and radiant. To the church, he was dangerous. To artists, he was a revelation. Painters from Italy, France, Spain, and the Netherlands became his followers, the Caravaggisti, carrying his bold realism across Europe. Even the great masters Rubens, Rembrandt, and Velázquez felt his influence. His light burned in their canvases, long after his own had gone out. Caravaggio had broken the chains of ideal beauty and shown that divinity could dwell in darkness. His revolution was not just artistic, it was spiritual. He had proven that, even in shadow, truth shines brightest. For centuries after his death, Caravaggio's name was whispered with both admiration and disgust. To some, he was a genius, to others a sinner. His violent life overshadowed his art. The church, uneasy with his realism and scandals, hid many of his works from public view. For generations, he was remembered as the mad painter, the murderer with a brush. Yet legends grew. People spoke of his ghost wandering Roman alleys, searching for peace. His art was rediscovered again and again by those who saw beyond his sins. Writers and poets found in him the ultimate paradox, the sinner who painted saints, the fugitive who revealed God's light. His paintings aged like wounds that never healed. Each canvas bore his confession, the rage, the fear, the longing. When art historians in later centuries studied his work, they realized something profound. Caravaggio had not painted beauty, he had painted truth. And truth, they discovered, is often violent, imperfect, and divine all at once. His legacy, once buried in shadow, began to glow again, fierce, timeless, and haunting, like the man himself. In the 20th century, art historians began to dig deeper. Hidden in old chapels and dusty archives, they found Caravaggio's lost masterpieces. Each discovery was like uncovering buried treasure. The world finally saw what his contemporaries had feared. his genius. Exhibitions in Rome, Milan, and Paris reignited fascination with his work. People stood silent before his canvases, struck by the power of his light, the reality of his humanity. Modern critics hailed him as the father of cinematic realism. Directors, photographers, and painters all drew from his dramatic storytelling through light. Filmmakers like Scorsese and painters like Bacon saw him as the original rebel, the man who dared to paint the soul of the street. Caravaggio's story became one of resurrection, the outlaw who returned from history's grave to claim his rightful place among the immortals. His art no longer belonged to the church or the critics. It belonged to humanity. In every dark gallery where his light still flickers, Caravaggio breathes again, whispering the truth he once painted, that even in darkness, there is grace. For centuries have passed, yet Caravaggio's light has never dimmed. His name echoes in every gallery, his influence felt in every photograph, film, and painting that dares to show real emotion. He was not perfect, he was human, fragile, wild, but perhaps that's why his art feels eternal. Today, when we look at his canvases, the trembling saints, the wounded sinners, the sudden flash of divine light, we see ourselves. Caravaggio painted life, not legend. He painted what it means to fall and to seek redemption through beauty. His story is not of failure, but of fire, a life that burned too fast, but illuminated the path for centuries to come. Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio remains the eternal rebel, the painter who saw God not in the heavens, but in the faces of ordinary men. And though he died in the shadows, his light lives on forever, glowing in every brushstroke, every shadow, every soul touched by art.